I'm Afshin Ratansia. We're going underground as UK Conservative Party leadership nominations dominate mainstream headlines while ignoring UN figures claiming 14 million people here now live their lives in poverty. Coming up on the show. Did Theresa May's government commit the UN Charter's supreme war crime? We speak to a former shadow minister who has just tabled a written parliamentary question about a possible staged justification for last year's British aerial bombardment of Syria. And was New York-born Donald Trump right when, before meeting the Queen, he blamed Russia, Syria and Iran for the indiscriminate killing of civilians in Idlib? Or was Donald Trump de facto supporting those who would have supported the 9/11 massacre in his birthplace? All this and more coming up in today's Going Underground. But first, 8 years ago, the IAEA reported Syria to the UN Security Council over suspected nuclear weapons. Barack Obama's State Department quickly followed up, arguably using the Iraq War WMD playbook.
Syria's apparent attempt at constructing a secret, undeclared plutonium production reactor, a reactor with no credible peaceful purpose, represents one of the most serious safeguards violations possible.
Soon, a US politician who could have begun World War III had Donald Trump not been elected, doubled down on WMD claims to justify war on Syria.
I really believe that we should have and still should take out his airfields and prevent him from being able to use them to bomb innocent people and drop sarin gas on them.
So-called mainstream media is fully on board with WMD claims.
Worldwide reaction today to a dangerous move in Syria. Chemicals, deadly sarin gas, loaded onto weapons near an airfield there. One drop of sarin can kill within minutes.
And on UK TV, up popped alleged war criminal and former Labour PM Tony Blair advocating yet more war in the Middle East.
We've had probably, 12 different incidents of the use of chemical weapons. So if the world doesn't take a stand, it sends a very clear signal.
Blair-right anti-Jeremy Corbyn MPs would then support Theresa May's aerial bombardment of Syria last year. And here is how the war was justified in the face of accusations that she had committed what the UN Charter calls the supreme war crime, the crime of aggression.
Let me set out why we have taken this action. Last Saturday, up to 75 people, including young children, were killed in a despicable and barbaric attack in Douma, with as many as 500 further casualties. We have worked with our allies to establish what happened, and all the indications are that this was a chemical weapons attack.
But was the chemical attack staged? Joining me now from Derby is an ally of Jeremy Corbyn, Chris Williamson, who has submitted a written question to the UK Foreign Office, run by Jeremy Hunt, who now faces election by Tory MPs to be Britain's next Prime Minister. Chris, welcome back to Going Underground. Just before we get to OPCW and Foreign Affairs, what went wrong in Peterborough, where certainly mainstream media seems to be suggesting you should have won with a bigger majority?
Well, I thought it was an excellent result. I mean, particularly given the circumstances that we're confronted with at the moment and the attacks that we were subjected to in the run-in to the election on Thursday. I think we've had a really good result. I mean, the truth is we've increased our majority. Peterborough isn't really a traditional Labour seat, but because of our organisation, I think also because of the strength of the message that we were putting out there, a message of hope, a message that we can transform the country, people turned out and voted Labour. And as I say, we got a bigger majority than we achieved in 2017. So I'm thoroughly delighted with the result. Well,
arguably mainstream media narratives on Syria have never been more powerful these past, 10 years nearly. Tell me about the written question you've written to the Foreign Secretary.
Well, look, I'm very concerned. I mean, I expressed those reservations last year about the decision to launch airstrikes against Syria based on very flimsy evidence. I got pilloried, frankly, in the mainstream press and by some of my parliamentary colleagues. But it now looks like the concerns that I had were shared certainly by a number of the OPCW investigators who looked into the question of a chemical weapons attack in Douma. And what the OPCW report said at the time, after they'd concluded their deliberations, was that, yes, it looked like it had indeed been a chemical weapons attack, and that that had been actually launched from the air, as it were. Robert Fisk, who spoke to people shortly after the attack, said that, indeed doctors, that they thought that people were suffering from the effects of something called hypoxia, which is a shortage of oxygen created by a big dust cloud, which was created as a result of a military bombardment, but not by a chemical weapons attack. Now it turns out there was a minority report suggesting from the OPCW that the canisters, the chemical weapons canister, was actually placed there by somebody on the ground, as it were, rather than it being dropped from the sky.
We've invited the OPCW on. It seems the OPCW, despite the redaction, is now seeking out who this whistleblower is who leaked the document. The Working Group on Syria Propaganda and Media is who I suppose we have to be grateful to. You mentioned Robert Fisk. I mean, he said eyewitnesses had claimed no gas use when he visited Douma after the staged attack, as it were, the alleged staged attack. But who could possibly benefit by the RAF bombing there? I mean, only Al-Qaeda and ISIS-Daesh, presumably.
Well, that's the real concern. And of course, the kind of military conglomerates, these shady organisations which benefit from arms sales. But as Robert Fisk himself has said, that when you read a report from the OPCW, you expect the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the fact that they've redacted a key element of the report, which has now come to light, I think, draws people to the conclusion that, well, maybe we can't trust the OPCW after all. And that is very, very worrying indeed. This is one of the organisations that, should be unimpeachable in that sense. But this does, it seems to me, bring into sharp relief the need for people like Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, to actually shine a light on these matters. The hysterical mainstream media at the time a year ago, who seemed to be clamouring for military airstrikes, have been incredibly silent about this. I remember having a very rough interview on Channel 4 about the whole issue, and yet they seem to, as far as I'm aware, have failed to follow up now with this, this, I think, quite damning revelation which has been brought to light by a whistleblower.
But before anyone thinks that Britain committed the supreme war crime in the UN Charter by bombing Syria because it wasn't in self-defense and didn't have a UN Security Council resolution, surely our Prime Minister relied on her and the government relied on their own independent intelligence, aside from the OPCW. Your leader, Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, Privy Councillor, would have seen the intelligence. There must have been more to it, although I should add, Jeremy Corbyn obviously didn't support the airstrikes.
No, Jeremy certainly didn't support it, and as the point I was making at the time, 12 months ago, it was that the intelligence was very, very limited. I mean, when Theresa May came to the House and spoke, I mean, all she was relying on was hearsay. And goodness knows how many civilians died as a consequence of the airstrike that she was responsible for.
You mentioned whistleblowers. Of course, Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott was lampooned for her support of Julian Assange against what Theresa May and Sajid Javid said about the capture of Julian Assange, who the UN claims is being tortured in southeast London. Do you see whistleblowers as key to trying to find out the reasons why Britain bombs other countries?
Well, without these whistleblowers, then much of this information simply wouldn't come to light and won't come to light in the future. And they provide an invaluable service, it seems to me, to the public interest. And what is very regrettable is the tradition that we used to, in a way, I suppose, take for granted, that investigative journalists, serious journalists like John Pilger and so on, seem to be sadly lacking these days. I mean, Robert Fisk is a very unusual animal these days.
Well, arguably the House of Commons didn't take much notice of Robert Fisk's article. He said about Douma that a doctor he interviewed heard someone shouting gas, and it was a white helmet, according to his eyewitness. But in the OPCW report, they said someone shouted gas, but they removed the idea that it was a white helmet. The white helmets, of course, are funded by the British government. What did you make of that?
Well, I think that, again, is very troubling information, isn't it? And it's going to call into question future reports that the OPCW is responsible for. And I think rather than indulging in some sort of witch hunt against the whistleblower inside the organisation, they should be, venerating, honouring that individual and using it really as a way of, repairing the damage to their reputation and, giving the public, if you like, the trust that future reports that they deliver are trustworthy.
Well, as I say, we invite the OPCW on this show. We haven't been able to get them as such. We'll try and get a statement from them. Let's just turn quickly to the 2-year anniversary of the Grenfell tragedy or catastrophe that so many saw was emblematic of post-2008 austerity. What did you make of the Kensington and Chelsea MP Emma Code claiming that the attitude of the council there was feudal, that racism, let alone classism, is now evident? People talking about the area around Grenfell is Africa down there.
Well, they were absolutely shocking revelations from Emma. And, to hear that kind of language in this day and age, particularly in view of what happened there 2 years ago, is really spine-chilling, actually. And, I said at the time that Grenfell is a direct consequence, frankly, of decades, really, of deregulation, privatisation and cuts. We've seen the Fire and Rescue Service hacked to the bone. I think so 20% of frontline firefighters have gone.
You were Shadow Fire and Emergencies Minister. Any fears that it's going to be the firefighters that get blamed and not the property developers and private contractors that may have been involved in this tragedy?
Well, that seemed to be the tenor of the inquiry. And, I did express some reservations at the time about Sir Martin Morbig, the chair of the inquiry, who was seen as a pillar of the establishment and had made some very dubious rulings on key legal cases previous to that. We need to ensure that this report that eventually comes out does have the confidence of the local community. But to try to, push the blame onto the firefighters is absolutely shameful. And that seemed to be the tenor of some of the discussion and the questioning that was being put, during the inquiry, where firefighters were giving evidence. And it's absolutely not the firefighters' fault. They are heroes. They risk their lives. I know that some of the firefighters went into that building on 3 or 4 occasions, and I know some people who have friends who lived in the tower, and they nearly perished. Their lives were saved by the firefighters. They accepted the advice, and somebody came knocking on their door and they said, "We need to get out." They said, No, the advice is we need to stop. But they said the situation was getting desperate. Smoke was coming into the flat, and they decided to get the family together. Said, "Look, we're going to have to try and get out of here." They put wet towels over their heads. They got down 3 floors and collapsed from smoke inhalation. It was thanks to the firefighters that saved their lives. And so many people's lives were saved on that night. But you cannot blame the firefighters. The responsibility for this lies with those political decisions that were taken. And it goes back a long time. It goes back, really, frankly, to the implementation of neoliberalism in this country.
Chris Williamson, thank you. After the break. 37 years to the day Israel was defeated by Syria in Lebanon, we question NATO nation reporting of the war on al-Qaeda in Idlib with the MP for Aleppo and the founder of the Syrian Network for Human Rights. All this and more coming up in part 2 of Going Underground. Welcome back. This week, chemical weapons use by the Assad government comes under scrutiny at the UN Security Council. Could Britain again join with the USA and France in bombing Syria? Because NATO nation media is again full of news of alleged war crimes being carried out in Idlib in the northwest of the country. One of those calling for urgent action is the chairman and founder of the Syrian Network for Human Rights, Fadel Abdul Ghany. He joins me now via Skype from Istanbul in Turkey. Fadel, thanks for coming on the show. What is the situation in Idlib right now?
I think the bombing is continuously taking place, targeting lots of vital centers. And as SNHR, we documented that more than 350 civilians have been killed, including about 100 children and 65 women. So this is a very high level of casualties. Actually, it's taking place since 26th of April till now. Lots of people have been injured, about 1,000 civilians as well. Attacking of the medical facilities, we recorded 27 attacks, and 54 schools have been targeted, 34 place of worship as well. And 3 IDP camps. That lead to people to be terrified and to be displaced, move to further from the border of clashes above further to the north of Syria.
I'm just wondering whether you think that there shouldn't really be any action at the moment against the people that control Idlib, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
Yes, of course, that the Syrian society is affected too much from Hayat Tahrir Sham, from ISIS, from the extremist group. That's right, actually, but we don't think that this is the way to defeat or to actually get rid out of Hayat Tahrir Sham. By targeting the civilians and by targeting everyone, actually. I think that strength the moderate Syrian fighters in order to make themselves defeated.
Who are the moderate Syrian fighters?
Actually, this definition also need to be very much important, but those actually are available. Who is fighting in Kafr Buda, for examples? Those are the Kafr Buda people. Those are the local people who didn't affected by their mind by Hayat Tahrir Sham, and who's fight for several times Hayat Tahrir Sham and ISIS as well, and also they fighting the regime. They fighting those both sides as well. Those exist actually.
They don't fight alongside the Al-Qaeda linked, formerly Al-Nusra group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
No, they will not fight with them. And I think maybe now maybe they are united against Assad because they considered Assad worse than the worst side.
So they consider, let me just be clear, they consider that President Assad of Syria is worse than groups that supported the 9/11 massacres on Washington and New York.
I don't think that this al-Nusra is similar to those who support this, what's happened in Washington. But of course, we condemn all the extremist group. But I think Assad committed more crimes than what Hayat Tahrir Sham did in Syria. Killed like further maybe trouble or rather than troubles, violation than what's the other side is committed. Assad is committed about 85% from total violation what's happened in Syria. So I think no one is accepted Assad at all, and they will be united. But who push people to be extremists? Actually, the lack of intervention to protect the civilians. So they consider.
You're not calling for intervention. You're a neutral NGO, right?
No, actually, we are objective, not neutral. Neutral is ICRC, but actually the international law considered the responsible to protect as one principle, and this exists by the General Assembly in 2005.
So you supported British bombing of Syria last year?
We didn't support any bomb of Syria in general. We support intervention to protect the civilians. That's very specific. We are not supporting general bombing for anyone, actually.
So you're not calling for any outside military intervention?
We are calling for intervention to protect the civilians. Outside...
medical, humanitarian, not military.
Military and medical and any measures, and this is very clear.
But if you call for military intervention, you're advocating for the supreme war crime as in the UN Charter, because military intervention is illegal as the supreme war crime under the UN Charter.
Yeah, as you know, when the UN Security Council failed to implement the Charter, so what to do? Now 8 years of failure and the killing of civilians and crimes against humanity.
Okay, all right. I mean, obviously that's illegal under international law. It is the supreme war crime. I mean, you're saying these figures of 320 killed in Idlib. And of course, we have a problem that you're advocating, I mean, arguably for the supreme war crime. Are you actually connected to the British government?
we are not linked to the British government or any government, actually. We are objective, and we criticize the international coalition violation, as well as we criticize the Russian forces violation.
So the British government is lying. The Foreign Office is lying when in their report from 2018, they quote the Syrian Network for Human Rights. They say that in the footnotes, you're quoted quite a few times, and it's called Save Syrian Schools. The British government says they worked with you, and they footnote Russian atrocities that you've claimed through videos.
They are not lying if they quoting us, several government quoting us, lots of government, because we are a reliable source. We are local national organization who provide the government with information, so it's very obvious that State Department keep quoting us, the Danish, the France, the UK, even the Arabic, some of Arabic government as well, the Turkish authority. So we are open source, we are publishing.
So you haven't been funded because there are claims that the British government has been providing expenses?
Maybe this project, we are just participate with this school project as one of several sources also as well. So we are not funded for this project. We are not getting fund from the UK government at all, but maybe they fund this project is committed with the ICTJ.
But what's concerning me, of course, is that there seems some circularity here, because if you work with British-linked organizations who advocate regime change in Syria and then provide the statistics the British government uses for us, the public, to want us to go to war with Syria, this is just one big circle, isn't it?
No, but you didn't allow me to complete my sentence, and so you are talking maybe more than what I want to talk. I want to explain my opinion, if you allow to me. We are not, I'm coming to repeat again, that this project, we are participate with this project only. This maybe ICTJ is funded by the UK. So let's finish from this point. How are we gonna to move to transitional or stability for the Syria? I know that we want everyone, we want steady for the Syria and Syria to be moved from this circle. This is gonna to happen by political process, not by keep killing people, keep pressure people to the end. This will lead to the violence, and this will not gonna to end at all.
So you're against bombing. Just to be clear, the Syrian Network for Human Rights is not advocating for bombing. Well, you just said a moment ago that you wanted military intervention.
Military intervention, I told you specifically, to protect the civilians due to the failure of the UN Security Council under Chapter 41 and 42. You know, after it's in the chapter, they mentioned when the political things failed, and it's failed in Syria now.
There is nothing in the UN. There are only two ways in which military intervention works under the UN Charter. I think you'll find they believe it's a supreme war crime. Fadel Abdul Ghany, thank you. Well, to respond to those accusations is the MP for Aleppo and chairman of the Syrian Federation of Industry, Faraz Shahabi. He joins me now via Skype. From Aleppo, Faraz, thanks for coming back on. So why are Syrian soldiers, Russian soldiers, why are they bombing hospitals and killing civilians in Idlib?
Well, according to these false allegations, we have more hospitals than all of Europe and the United States combined. Every square inch, we have 10 or 20 hospitals.
Well, the UK Guardian said 25. The UK Guardian said 25 hospitals and something called civil defense rescue centers have been bombed by...
Yeah, these civil defense centers with the Al-Qaeda flags and Al-Qaeda troops. One of these locations, it was underground in a remote area. And, you know, of course, you would find the white helmet stuff inside of it, as long as the Tau anti-tank missiles and the C4 explosives,
what about the 54
all of them together in one location.
What about the 54 schools, the places of worship, the 326 killed between 26th April and 2nd June, the 1,200 injured?
Look, we've heard these lies when we liberated the eastern parts of Aleppo, and when we went there to see, it was a big lie. As a matter of fact, these 40 to 50,000 foreign terrorists there, They are the ones who are targeting our cities, the city of Mahardi, the Christian town of Mahardi, the Christian town of Sqailibiye, with rockets every day. And we have martyrs, civilian people killed every day by these terrorists.
Sky News, Comcast Sky News award-winning reporter Alex Crawford, after her coverage of Libya, she's been to your country. She came under fire when she was with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Who do you think, what do you make of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? Because we just heard from the Syrian Network for Human Rights that they're not as bad as your president.
Well, I mean, if they're not so bad, why are they meeting? Why are they working with Al-Qaeda? I mean, I'm talking about pictures and videos. I'm not talking about allegations. When you promote such groups, the head-chopping groups, the guys who do not believe in a multi-ethnic society, multi-religious society, the ones who only believe in Sharia and religious law in Syria.
Well, as I say, Sky News, the British Guardian, Britain's Channel 4 News, they're all claiming that your government is committing atrocities. Trump, of course, just before, on the day he met the Queen here in London, said Russia, Syria, to a lesser extent Iran, targeting innocent civilians. Some people saying we're prepared for more bombing of your country. Britain is. What did you make of the OPCW leaked documents suggesting no chemical attack in Douma, which was the premise of why Britain bombed your country last year?
Of course, because we knew before the leak was, the OPCW leaked this. We knew since with the Douma hospital staff, the ones that were shown in the video, in the fake video, they said that there was no bombing, there was no chemical bombing. They said it was staged by the White Helmet Gang, which is funded by the British Foreign Office. These networks, these news networks, are collaborators with Al-Qaeda. They fund Al-Qaeda. They promote Al-Qaeda. They are just as guilty in shedding Syrian blood as Al-Qaeda.
You know, Turkey won't, as agreed with Russia last year, appears not to be abiding by the agreement, doesn't want them back in Turkey. What is going to happen? We saw 25 years ago when genocidal militias in Rwanda used Hutus as human shields. Are we going to witness that kind of thing in Idlib?
Look, Turkey is using its monitoring points as basis for training, arming Al-Qaeda. Just days ago, I'm talking about Reuters report, they just armed Al-Qaeda gangs with tons and tons of weapons, including the Tau anti-missile tank. We don't trust the Turkish government. The Turkish government works and uses these gangs in order to, as a tool, in order to annex Syrian land. They want Idlib to be part of Turkey. We know their real intentions, and we don't trust them. And we will liberate the 3 million or so civilians.
Faraz Shahabi, thank you. And we invite the Turkish ambassador to London on the show to rebut those claims. We'll be back on Wednesday, ahead of the second anniversary of London's Grenfell Tower catastrophe. It claimed the lives of 72 people in one of the poorest areas of Europe, in one of the richest parts of the world. Until then, keep in touch via social media. See you on Wednesday.